I want to start with something that might feel very close to home. Think about someone in your life right now, a spouse, a sibling, a close friend, maybe an adult child, whose drinking has been quietly worrying you. Maybe it's been going on for a while. Maybe it's something that's changed recently, after a loss or a major life transition. Maybe you've noticed it at family gatherings, or in the way their health has been shifting, or in small comments they make that reveal how central alcohol has become to their daily routine. And you haven't said anything, not because you don't care, but because you have no idea how to say it without damaging the relationship, without being dismissed, without making things worse. If that's where you are, I want you to know something important before we go any further. The fact that you're here, the fact that you're thinking about this, researching this, trying to figure out the right way to approach someone you love, that says something meaningful about who you are. It says you haven't given up. It says the relationship matters enough to you to do this right. And today, I want to help you do exactly that. The guidance we're drawing from comes from the National Institute on Aging, researchers who understand specifically how alcohol affects older adults and what families and friends can do when they're concerned. This isn't generic advice. It's developed for this stage of life, for these relationships, for conversations that are genuinely complicated. And there's something specific I want to build toward today. Something about the timing and framing of these conversations that most people get completely wrong, and that when corrected, dramatically changes the outcome. Stay with me. Let's start by acknowledging something that most advice on this topic skips entirely. Watching someone you love struggle with alcohol is not a simple, clean experience. It's layered. It involves worry and frustration and sometimes anger. It involves the helpless feeling of watching someone you care about make choices that are hurting them. And it often involves a particular kind of loneliness, because this isn't the kind of thing most people talk about openly, even with close friends. You may have been carrying this quietly for months, maybe longer, trying to figure out the right moment, the right words, the right approach, wondering if you're overreacting, wondering if saying something will push them further away, wondering if your relationship can absorb an honest conversation about something this sensitive. These are real concerns. They're not signs of weakness or indecision. They're the natural result of caring deeply about someone whose situation is complicated. Here's the first thing the research makes clear, and it reframes the whole conversation from the beginning. You don't need to be certain that someone has a serious problem in order to have a caring, honest conversation. You don't need to wait until things are dramatically bad. You don't need a diagnosis or a threshold crossed or a moment of crisis. All you need is genuine concern, and the desire to express it in a way that opens a door rather than closes one. That's a much lower bar than most people set for themselves. And lowering it, letting yourself act on concern before things reach a crisis point, is actually one of the most loving things you can do. Let's talk about timing, because this is the detail that most people get wrong, and it matters more than almost anything else about how these conversations unfold. The guidance from the National Institute on Aging is unambiguous on this point. Talk about your concerns when the person is sober. This sounds obvious. But in practice, the conversations that actually happen, the ones that finally break through months of silence, often happen at the wrong moment. They happen after an incident, after a family event where things were awkward or uncomfortable, after an argument that escalated. In other words, they happen when both people are emotionally activated and when the person who drinks may be either under the influence or in the defensive aftermath of it. Those conversations almost never go well, not because the concern isn't valid, but because the conditions don't allow for the kind of calm, receptive exchange that actually creates change. The right conversation happens when the person is fully present, clear-headed, not defensive from something that just happened, not managing the physical or emotional residue of drinking. A quiet Tuesday afternoon, a calm morning, a moment when nothing else is charged or loaded. Choosing that moment deliberately, even if it means waiting longer than you want to, is not passive. It's strategic. It's the difference between a conversation that plants a seed and one that builds a wall. There's a second dimension to timing that the research addresses, and this one involves something that might feel counterintuitive. Sometimes the most effective entry point into this conversation isn't about the drinking at all, it's about information. The National Institute on Aging specifically suggests an opening like this. I've been learning about how alcohol affects the health of older adults, and I wanted to share some of what I found. Or, if you ever think about making a change, I've heard of some tools that can help. Notice what those openings do. They don't accuse, they don't diagnose. They don't position you as someone who has identified a problem and is now here to fix it. They position you as someone who cares enough to share information and who trusts the other person to do something useful with it. For many people, that framing is the difference between a conversation they can receive and one they immediately shut down. Because nobody likes feeling caught or cornered or judged. But most people can receive information from someone they trust who is offering it with genuine care. Now let's talk about what to actually say. Because good intentions and the right timing are necessary, but they're not sufficient. The words matter. The National Institute on Aging recommends expressing what you think and feel in personal terms, rather than making declarative statements about the other person's behavior or character. The difference is significant. A statement like, "You've been drinking too much lately," puts the other person on the defensive immediately. It's a judgment delivered as a fact, and the natural human response to being judged is to argue, deny, or withdraw. Compare that to, "I've been worried about you lately, and I wanted to talk about it," or, "I care about you, and I've noticed some things that concern me. Can we talk?" These aren't just softer versions of the same message. They're fundamentally different communicative acts. The first one is a verdict. The second one is an invitation, and invitations can be accepted. Verdicts just have to be defended against. The research also recommends avoiding labels, not calling someone an alcoholic, not applying diagnostic categories that feel stigmatizing and that often cause people to disengage entirely. The conversation isn't about who the person is. It's about a pattern of behavior and what it might be doing to their health. Providing facts, specific, accurate information about how alcohol affects the aging body, can be genuinely useful here. Not as ammunition, but as context that gives the person a new framework for thinking about something they may have assumed was completely familiar. The fact that the body's response to alcohol changes with age, that the same amount now produces a higher blood concentration than it did 20 years ago, that medications interact with alcohol in ways that amplify risk significantly, that alcohol can worsen conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, and memory problems. These are things many older adults genuinely don't know, and information, offered with care, can create openings that confrontation never does. This next detail changes everything about how these conversations land. People are far more likely to change behavior when they feel respected and informed than when they feel judged and cornered. The research on behavior change is consistent on this. Autonomy, the sense that a choice is yours to make, is one of the strongest predictors of whether a change sticks. A conversation that respects someone's autonomy while offering them real information is doing the most powerful possible thing for long-term change. Now, I want to spend time on something that I think is genuinely underappreciated in these situations: the role of professional support, and specifically, how you can help someone access it. One of the most practical suggestions in the National Institute on Aging's guidance is to offer to accompany the person to a doctor or counselor appointment, not just to suggest that they go, to offer to go with them. Think about what that offer actually communicates. It says, "I'm not sending you somewhere alone to deal with something difficult. I'm going to be there with you. I'm not handing you information and stepping back. I'm walking alongside you." That offer, in many cases, is the thing that transforms intention into action. Because one of the primary reasons people don't seek professional help is the anticipated isolation and discomfort of the process. Having someone they trust sitting next to them in the waiting room removes one of the most significant barriers. If the person is open to counseling or a support group, offering to drive them to and from those appointments is similarly powerful, not because they can't get there themselves, but because it signals ongoing commitment. It says this is not a one-time conversation that ends when you close the door. This is something I'm willing to show up for, repeatedly, as long as you need. And this is why doctors rarely explain this clearly. The clinical conversation typically ends with a referral and a pamphlet. It doesn't address the relational dimension of behavior change. The fact that people are far more likely to follow through on treatment when they feel supported and accompanied by someone who loves them. You have the ability to provide something a doctor can't. Your presence, your consistency, your patience. These things matter enormously in the actual process of change. We're now at the part of today's video that I want you to stay for, because everything I've covered so far is about how to help someone else, and this section is about something that might be harder to hear. It's about you. The National Institute on Aging is direct and compassionate on this point. Caring for someone with alcohol misuse or alcohol use disorder can be stressful, and that stress is real, it is documented, and it deserves just as much attention as the situation you're trying to help with. Chronic worry about someone you love, the vigilance, the second-guessing, the monitoring, the difficult conversations, the setbacks, takes a toll. Not because you're fragile, but because you're human, and sustained emotional stress has real physiological and psychological consequences. The research specifically recommends that people in your position seek support from friends, from family, from counseling, from support groups specifically designed for people who are navigating a loved one's alcohol use. One resource worth knowing about is Al-Anon, a long-standing support organization specifically for friends and family members of people with drinking problems. It exists because the people around someone who drinks heavily need support too. Not secondary, afterthought support. Primary, dedicated support. Al-Anon can be reached at 888-425-2666 to find a meeting near you. The guidance also recommends involving other trusted family members or friends in this process, not to stage an intervention or to pile pressure on one person, but so that you are not carrying this alone. Isolation in a difficult situation amplifies stress, distorts perspective, and erodes the resilience you need to stay engaged over time. Because here's the truth that most people in your position don't hear clearly enough. You cannot help someone else sustainably if you are depleted, unwell, or overwhelmed. Taking care of yourself is not a distraction from helping your loved one. It is the foundation that makes sustained, effective help possible. Let's talk about one more thing before we get to practical actions, and it's about managing your own expectations, not as a way of lowering the bar, but as a way of staying in this for the long haul. The National Institute on Aging makes a point that is worth taking seriously. Overcoming alcohol use disorder is an ongoing process that may include setbacks. That's not pessimism, that's accuracy, and it matters enormously for how you approach this. If you enter these conversations expecting immediate, lasting change, if your measure of success is that one honest talk produces a complete turnaround, you will be disappointed. And that disappointment can translate into frustration, withdrawal, or the feeling that you failed somehow. But if you enter with a longer timeline, if you understand that change happens gradually, non-linearly, with good weeks and hard weeks, and sometimes apparent steps backward, then setbacks become part of the process rather than the end of it. Your patience doesn't get depleted by each imperfect moment. It gets replenished by the understanding that this is what real change looks like. Your job is not to fix this. Your job is to open doors, to stay present, to offer information and support and your own caring presence, and to trust that those things, accumulated over time, can make a real difference in what another person is able to do. That's a meaningful role. It's also a limited one, and knowing the difference between those two things is part of what allows you to sustain it. Let's bring everything together now with concrete, practical actions. The first is to choose your moment deliberately. Before you have the conversation, decide on the right conditions. The person is sober. The environment is calm. There's no recent incident or family event adding emotional charge. Plan it in advance rather than waiting for an impulse moment. The conversation you prepare for is the conversation most likely to go well. The second is to lead with information and concern rather than labels or accusations. Use the framing the research supports, sharing something you've learned, expressing what you personally feel, inviting a conversation rather than delivering a verdict. Keep the focus on care, for their health, for the relationship, for the future you both want to share. The third is to offer concrete, specific help. Not a general, "I'm here if you need me." Specific offers. "I'll come with you to a doctor's appointment. I'll drive you to a counseling session. I'll sit with you while you look up some resources." Specificity makes help real. It removes the friction between intention and action. The fourth is to have resources ready to share, not as pressure, but as genuine options. The NIAAA's Rethinking Drinking website is a free, evidence-based starting point. Al-Anon at 888-425-2666 for support for families and friends. A primary care doctor as the first clinical point of contact. Having these available and being able to say, "Here's one place to start," gives the conversation somewhere concrete to go. And the fifth, and I want to say this with genuine emphasis, is to take your own well-being seriously throughout this process. Find at least one person you can talk to honestly about what you're going through. Consider a counselor or a support group like Al-Anon, which exists precisely for people in your position. If you're experiencing symptoms of anxiety or depression as a result of this situation, please seek support for yourself. You deserve it, and you will be a better, more sustained source of help for the person you love if you are genuinely taken care of. Here's what I want you to carry with you from today. You are not powerless in this situation. The research is clear that the people who love someone struggling with alcohol can make a real, meaningful difference. Through the conversations they have, the support they offer, the patience they sustain, and the consistency of their presence over time. And you are also not responsible for someone else's choices. You can open doors, you can offer information and support and love, you can make it easier for someone to reach for help, but the reaching is theirs to do. What you can control is how you show up, the care you bring to the conversation, the patience you bring to the process, the honesty you bring to both your concern for them and your concern for yourself. That is enough. That is, in fact, a great deal. And the fact that you're here, thinking carefully about how to do this right, means you're already doing something important. The people who love us and refuse to look away, even when it's hard, they are among the most powerful forces for change that exist. You might be that person for someone you love. Don't give up. Before you go, here's something I want to plant for next time. We've talked across this series about many of the factors that shape how well we age: nutrition, movement, cognitive health, and the relational challenges that come with later life. But there's a topic I haven't addressed yet that connects nearly all of them in ways that are both surprising and deeply practical. It's about how the relationships in your life, not just the difficult ones, but all of them, shape your physical health in measurable, documented ways. The research on social connection and longevity in older adults is among the most striking in all of aging science, and it has implications for how you spend your time, who you invest in, and how seriously you take the quality of your relationships as a health matter. That's coming up next. And if you want to be there, if you want to keep getting clear, compassionate, research-grounded guidance on aging with strength and wisdom, subscribe to this channel. Take very good care of yourself. The people in your life are lucky to have someone who cares the way you do.